Hi there.
Hi,
Good evening. How's everybody doing? How you doing, Stephen?
good you?
I'm really good. I'm not gonna get into why, because then it might make me sad, but I'm good.
Make me sad. Very funny.
I don't want to make you sad.
Look, it was a good series.
Good, good. It was biblical. It was epic.
I agree. I agree with those great.
I feel sorry for the Canadian, for sweet Canadian people. It's hard
It's
to go.
okay. We got our pound. We got our pound. And besides the fact we've never been invited to the White House.
That's true. I'm gonna guess the number of the Dodgers aren't gonna want to go to the White House. We'll
Hi,
see.
everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm
Does
gonna
this class go till 9?
probably a quarter to 9. I think it's more likely.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll see. Maybe even 8:30. It just sort of depends. I don't want to keep people too late. We've got a lot of people signed up. I'm gonna wait till like maybe 7:31 or 7:32. I'm just looking at my material for 1 sec. I'll be right with you.
Did you go to the parade? That's the question.
I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I was here. I did go to the 18 inning marathon. I was at that game.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't stay all 18 innings because I was with my mother.
Yeah.
We made it through like 13 innings, which is almost 5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing went almost 7 hours.
Well, it sounds that she's doing well if she was going to a baseball game.
She is. She's doing. I mean, she did it in part to indulge me. It was not easy for her, but she's great.
I met your mom. She was a really, really nice lady.
Thank you. She is.
Okay, I'm going to head upstairs with this, so you're not going to see me for a minute or two, okay?
Okay. It's 7:29. I'm just gonna wait till like 7:31, and we'll get
Yeah,
started.
Archie's trying to get on for some reason. He registered, doesn't seem to have his papers. So I think he's trying. Otherwise, we'll be on the same one.
Hi, Valerie. Sorry, I didn't respond to your email yet, but I promised to.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I'm on my iPad. I can't seem to get on Zoom on my PC.
Yeah.
And it's not you. I'm having a problem with a lot of these things since some upgrades to 11. All this high technology. It's too much.
It's a lot. This is great. We've got a large class. I'm really excited.
You're not able to do it? Okay. Okay. So why am I like this? I don't understand. Okay. All right. You seemed okay.
Okay. 7:31. Okay.
Double or triple. Single starting at just $6.99.
Hope this is being recorded. It's supposed to be recorded. We'll see.
Enjoy 20 to 40% off everything. Save on give, they're sure to love. Live for love with people.
So I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves, because if you don't, then we hear every last sound in the background. And then when you want to say something, because we'll definitely have some contributions, you can unmute, but please mute yourselves. I believe it's automatically recording. That's my hope. It's supposed to be recording. So hopefully that's in fact. Let me. See.
Congestion with 100% naturally sourced seawater. Hydroset, breathe better without side
And I'm gonna have to mute.
effects. Brush you some mail.
The diaper subscription. Cancel. Get it. The Vivo app helps you keep it on your.
Anybody know what that sound is?
Can you mute us?
I'm muting people. All right, let's see. Okay. All right, great. Okay, let's get started. Great to see everybody. So this is a class called Exploring the Depths of Prayer. How can we find meaning in the daily Amidah? And I think I should say I'm going to guess that many of you know, a fundamental struggle or challenge in the Amidah and Jewish prayer more generally, which is that we're meant to say, we're commanded to say, and our tradition expects us to say, fixed prayers, traditionally every single day, several times a day. But even for those who come, let's say most Shabbatot, or even for those who don't, just come regularly. Fact is, there's a book that has prayers in it, and those prayers were not written by any of us. They may not speak to us personally, and we're meant to say these prayers. Of course, making it even more challenging is that they're in Hebrew, and that makes it, that can make it quite difficult for people. Though I just want to be clear, in the Talmud itself, it says explicitly that one is supposed to, if you can't read the Hebrew, to pray in your own language. So it's certainly okay to look at the English, to use the English as much or as little as you want. Nonetheless, you open a prayer book, and we're in a world of words not our own, that are speaking about, not all of them, many of them, collective, I'll call it national needs and desires for the people, and are not necessarily personal and heartfelt, and really expressing our most soulful and urgent needs and desires. So how is it possible that we can say with any sense of intention and authenticity prayers that were written literally somewhere between roughly 2,000 and 2,400 years ago, give or take? How can we say these time and time again without it becoming rote or lifeless, and also not really addressing our own individual and personal needs? How can we derive meaning and purpose from this form of prayer? Because make no mistake, this notion, forget about the Amidah, just in general, of reciting and saying prayers written by sages long ago, is at the core of the Jewish prayer experience. As you'll find out soon, it is by no means the only Jewish experience of prayer. Nonetheless, it's a very important one. So my task in this class and the next two ones is to see how, if and how, we can derive meaning and purpose and intentionality when we say the words of the Amidah, which are ancient and not our own. And I just want to start with a story. When I was in rabbinical school, I was teaching a group of students, and one of them told me the following story, that she was doing an internship in clinical pastoral care and was at a big hospital in Los Angeles. And since she was a rabbinical student, she was assigned mostly to Jews, but not only. And in fact, it was so big, such a big hospital, that all the different clergy from different religions would sort of go to different. They didn't just go to their own religious, confederates. They would have to sometimes deal. Protestant would deal with the Catholic, and so on. So she once came to a woman who was a Latina woman, an immigrant to the United States, who was struggling mightily with cancer, very serious, and she was in bed. And she was happy to see the rabbinical student whom she called Rabbi. And she said to this student, this is all according to the student who told the story in class, Rabbi, please come hold my hand and pray with me. Right? So the rabbinical student told us that, the first thing she did is break out her rabbinic manual prayer book that you use. And the woman said, no, Rabbi, just pray with me. Right. And the student didn't really know what to do. Right. Which I have to say, and she acknowledged, I'm not criticizing her, that is a problem. Right. That it just not being able to just spontaneously pray with somebody who's ill. And by the way, according to all perspectives, it is, of course, perfectly acceptable and fine in Jewish tradition to spontaneously utter words of prayer, right? There's nothing wrong about it. There's nothing, but it's just that our tradition is so focused on the words on a page, on an inherited tradition, on fixed prayers. I mean, we do have a Mishaberach for healing, right? But that's a minimum. That's a floor. That's not a maximum, right? So this is the dilemma. So what I want to do tonight is we're going to look at some texts and have discussion about, I'm going to call it the problem, right? The struggle of saying the Amidah, the challenges that it brings about, what exactly those challenges are, how and how our rabbis address them. That's number one. The next two classes, we're going to get much more specific, and we're going to look at a few specific blessings in the daily Amidah and see how we might bring meaning and purpose to those blessings. But tonight, we're going to be more, I'll call it theoretical, right? That is to say, we're going to talk about the tensions of trying to speak from the heart on the one hand and have some degree of connection and loyalty to our traditional prayer. We're focusing on the Amidah. Why? So the Amidah is, without question, the standing silent prayer is the most important and central prayer. You might say, what about the Shema? But interestingly, the Shema, while the Shema is required and it's a mitzvah to say it, it's not exactly considered a prayer. It's considered, it falls under the rubric of learning, right? You're sort of learning Torah when you say the Shema. You're commanded to say it, and it has beliefs that we're supposed to affirm. But the rabbis called the Amidah hatfilah, right? The prayer, right? It is the most essential form of prayer, tfilah, the prayer. And just very quickly, we're going to get into more of this next week. Its structure, it has a very specific structure. But the most general structure, I'll just say, and I'm talking about the daily Amidah, not holidays and Shabbat, is it has three opening blessings, which are considered blessings of praise. You're praising God for being mighty and strong and for sustaining our ancestors and for being holy. The image the rabbis conjure is that if you stepped in front of a king, the first thing you do is, oh, king, you're so mighty, you're so awesome, right? So that's number one. Then, and only then, after praising God, does one make what are called bakashot, requests. Okay, and in the daily Amidah, there are 13 of them. Really, there are 12, but we'll get into those distinctions next time, right? So let's call them 13. Okay, requests, we're asking for things. Sustenance, health, redemption, right? Justice. We're asking for various things. And then in the end, we have three concluding prayers, the Ritzeh, and then the Modi Menach Nulak, where we bow down, and then the one for peace. The centerpiece, the main theme of the last three is gratitude. So we start with praise. God, you're so awesome. And now I'm going to ask you for things. I ask you for this and for this and for this. And now I'm done asking you for things. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Right? That's the structure. Okay. But again, we'll get into the specifics of the Amidah in our next meeting. I want to say that again, I would say, at least for me, and I think just generally, ideally prayer is in fact supposed to be a pouring out of the soul. And in fact, in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, when people pray, there's no question that they're being sincere. They have unscripted moments. The most famous is when in the beginning of the book of Shmuel, when Hannah, wants to have a child and she can't get pregnant, and she pours her heart out to God spontaneously, and she's granted a child who becomes Shmuel, Samuel, but she's the story says she's kind of whispering to herself, and that becomes the model of the Amidah, of the standing silent prayer. So even in the Torah and in the rest of the Tanakh, it's supposed to be unscripted. And the rabbis imagine Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the Imahot as well, just spontaneously praying to God, right? And specifically, especially the women, to be able to give birth when they have trouble, like Sarah and Rachel, who had trouble giving birth. So if prayer is fundamentally a way of addressing God by expressing emotion, so how can we even imagine saying words to God that are rote, that are just, we're mailing it in, we're saying the same things we say every day? And I have to just tell you something, right? I've been praying 3 times a day for most of my adult life. I'm 60 years old. So let's say from when I was about 27 or 28, right? That's a lot of times. And I know the Amidah so well. I could probably say it backwards. I know it so well that I don't need the Siddur for it at all. I know it completely by heart. And that's a problem, right? Because the fact is, I can be in the Bahamas in my head while I say it. It's very easy for my mind to wander, right? It is hard to maintain a sense of what's called kavanah, of intentionality, right? Of intent. And in fact, it's interesting. There's I'll call it a minor halakha, Jewish law, that says you're not supposed to say it by heart. You're actually supposed to use the Siddur. I've been in a minyan with some Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, who are using their Siddurim. Believe me, they know it by heart, but they're reading from the Siddur, because I think there's a danger of, if you do it by heart, your mind will wander. If you look at the page, at least you can focus, right? In Jewish practice, of course, people don't only pray when we feel moved to pray. We're mandated to say the Amidah 3 times a day. Indeed, according to most sages, Shacharit and Mincha, the morning and afternoon prayers, are considered a mitzvah from the Torah to say. Mariv is a bit different. It's mandatory, but it's derabanan. It's rabbinic. And of course, we can't guarantee that each of these are going to be motivated by kavanah. I'd go further. I'd say I can pretty much guarantee that on a number of occasions there will not be kavanah, right? So there's a kind of trade-off here. We have a guarantee of regular prayer, right? Of regularly trying to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One, of standing before God. By the way, that's why it's the Amidah, where you go backwards 3 steps, you step forward 3 times. The idea there is you're standing before God. You're in a different space. So you're standing, you put your feet together like angels, right? And you're now standing before God. So we have this regular encounter with God without waiting for a specific urgent reason to address God, right? Which on one level you could say is a great advantage. If I waited for my heart to speak, I might be waiting for a long time. Judaism forces me, right, to confront God and to say prayers, even if I'm not in the mood, right? So you might say that's a plus, right? But it's dangerous because, as I've said ad nauseum almost, that it's very easy for this kind of fixed prayer to become rote and have no emotion or feeling at all. So we risk a world in which, as Rabbi Avraham Joshua Heschel complained, we quote, I wrote it here, recite the prayer book as if it were last week's newspaper, right? He wrote that. And that's a problem. That is a serious challenge. So now what I want to do is get into what our sages, our scholars thought about this dilemma that I'm posing and how we might think about it. So I'm going to bring up a text sheet and we'll look at it together. Okay, here we go. Let's see. All right, now I go back to Zoom. See if I can do this. I'm not the greatest Zoom person, but I think I can figure this out. Here we go. Okay. Can everybody see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How can we find meaning in the daily Amidah text sheet number 1? You see it? Okay. All right. So we're going to start with a midrash. This is a medieval midrash from Yemen, and it cites in the beginning a text from the 10 Commandments from Exodus 20. Lo tisad Shem Hashem lashav. Do not take the name of God in vain. Mikan amru chachamim. From here, our sages said that anyone who prays without kavanah, remember kavanah means intent, thought, right, feeling. Hamipalel below kavanah. Ma'aleh alav ki'ilu omer kilo yinakeh Hashem. We attribute to that person as if they said, for God will not forgive those who take God's name in vain. In other words, let me explain what this is saying, right? So this is explicitly saying that it's a very unusual take on the second commandment. The second commandment, don't take God's name in vain. If we recite God's name in prayer, but don't really feel the intention we're supposed to, aren't we violating the prohibition of taking God's name in vain? We're violating the second commandment. I mean, so that's daunting, right? That means that every time we say prayers without being serious about it and really having intent, says this midrash, if we do it without intent, we're violating the second commandment. That is, we're taking God's name in vain. Now, this is rare. I've never really heard this interpretation of taking God's name in vain, like this. But let's just say the bar is high, right? The bar is high. I mean, I just want to remind everybody what's at stake here, right? So does anybody know where the phrase Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov comes from? I can't see you all. So if you know that, it's in the Torah, right? It's actually mentioned several times, but it's most famously in one place. And when we open the Amidah, we say, right, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Anybody know? Okay, well, I'm not hearing from anybody, so I'll tell you the answer. If you need to unmute yourself, if you want to speak up. The answer is...
It's in the Amidah, no?
Well, it's in the Amidah, yes, that's what I'm saying. But where, it's in the Amidah, but where in the Torah is it?
Okay.
Where in the Torah is it? In other words, where did the rabbis who created the Amidah get it in the Torah? And the answer is say, go ahead.
When the Torah was given?
Good guess. No, but excellent guess. The Torah was given. Go ahead, Bill.
The burning bush?
Yes, ding, 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 ding. Bill gets huge mitzvah points, right? The burning bush, right? So when Moshe has his first encounter with God, right? He's like, what's going on? There's a burning bush. It's not being consumed. Where am I? What's going on? And God identifies God's self as saying, I am Hashem, the God of your ancestors, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. So, why do we begin the Amidah with that phrase? Because every single time we say the Amidah, we're supposed to be like Moshe at the burning bush, encountering God for the very first time, right? That's why it says Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. That is hard. That is a high bar, right? So when we're standing before God, it's serious. So by not having intent, says this midrash, right? It's like violating the second commandment. You're taking God's name in vain. It's very serious. Okay, let's keep going. All right. The next text is from the Bavli, from the Babylonian Talmud, right? So the stakes are high, as we've seen, might be violating one of the second and 10 commandments. So maybe if we don't have kavanah, if we don't have intent, you shouldn't pray, right? I mean, in other words, let's say I'm in a bad mood I'm just like, I'm off my game. Maybe I shouldn't pray. So let's see what Rabbi Elazar says. Rabbi Elazar said, Amar Rabbi Elazar, a person should always take stock of themselves. Adam et atzmo. Im yachol lechaven et libo yitpalel v'im lav al yitpalel. Take stock of oneself. If one can direct their heart, lechaven, kavana, to aim, direct one's heart, then say the Amidah. If not, don't even bother. Don't even bother. Okay, that is strong stuff, right? That's saying it's so important to have kavana. Now, that's a big deal. I mean, this is Rabbi Elazar, right? He's a major Tana, major land of Israel sage from the 2nd century. Is he really saying that, like, I'm free of my obligation to daven if I can't summon kavanah? But later rabbis actually said that one should indeed forego praying if one's emotional state was really bad. So if you're feeling right, what's the word is hametzar, somebody who's troubled, or dato lo miyushevet alav, they're distracted, or they have retach, they're angry, right? Then you are patur, you are exempt from davening. Say some rabbis in the Talmud. There's a story that some rabbis would wait 3 days after returning from a journey to say the Amidah, presumably because they were distracted, right? You come back from a long trip. Stephen, you do a lot of travel. I'm sure when you come back from Istanbul, there's a lot to deal with and so on. So some rabbis say, maybe like you're not obligated to pray, right? And the Rambam actually says, Maimonides says, whoever doesn't have kavanah for the Amidah, it's not considered an Amidah. Like if you say it and there's no intent, right? It's not an Amidah. Now, again, we have to figure out, so all right, then how are we going to do this? How do we have a kavanah? I haven't forgotten the big question, but that's a big deal, right? Nonetheless, this standard that you should only daven and say the Amidah if your prayers are heartfelt, right, is not what we follow today. And even in Talmudic terms, I take this as a tremendous consolation. Even in Talmudic times, right, there was an awareness that even if you don't have, not everybody can have kavanah, and you probably should daven and try and continue to pray anyway. So this is from the Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi was the other Talmud. It's a misnomer because it was actually put together in the Galilee, not in Jerusalem, but it's called the Jerusalem Talmud, as opposed to the Babylonian Talmud, okay? So here we go. So Rabbi Chia Ruba said, I never had kavanah in my life, right? Ana min yomai, lo what is it? Kivanet, I think it is. Kivanet, it's Aramaic. I never had kavanah in my life. Once I tried to have kavanah, right? Chadzman by mechavna, right? Once I tried to have kavanah, and I thought in my heart and said, who will enter before the king first, the tax collector or the exilarch? Right? The exilarch was the head of the diaspora community in Babylonia. Shmuel said, I count clouds. Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, right, said, I count rows of bricks. Right? So what's going on here? Right? So these sages admit that they struggled with kavanah, right? And their mind wandered, right? So for example, during the World Series, I might have been, I would say, I was davening and I was thinking about why Mookie Betts kept striking out, right? So in other words, I'm distracted. So this was their thing, right? One was thinking about royal etiquette, who will enter before the king first, the tax collector or the exilarch, sort of a random question about royal etiquette. One counted clouds, one counted rows of bricks, right? Their mind is wandering. I take so much consolation for this because my mind easily wanders. And here we know even important sages have the same problem, okay? So The next text we're going to look at is from like 13th, 14th century, 14th century Provence. And it's Rabbi David HaKochavi. And here he's basically says that you don't have to, there has to be room for praying without such a high bar. You still need to daven, basically, even if you can't get there. So let's take a look. So Rav Natronai Gaon. So this teacher, Rabbi David HaKochavi, is citing Rav Natronai HaGaon, who is in 9th century Baghdad, right? Wrote that all this, that is the specific exceptions to reciting the Amidah, all those things, like I was daydreaming or I couldn't have proper kavanah, all of that is in the early generations when their hearts were prepared for tefillah. But in our day, Bazman Hazeh, right, in our day, we do not cancel tefillah because of distraction. For it may come from a place of not for its own sake to a place of for its own sake. So this is weird. Let me explain. It's a famous rabbinic principle. Shemitok shelo lishma ba lishma. Okay, what this means is what I call, this is the Nike theory of Jewish law. Nike, right? You got it. That's right. It's just do it, right? Just do it, like Nike slogan. Meaning that you start off not having kavanah, right? Mitok shelo lishma, meaning literally, I'm not doing it for its own sake. I'm just doing it because I have to, and I've showed up. I got to put on the tefillin. I got to say my prayers. But I don't, I'm distracted. I'm worried about my business. Profits are really off and whatever. But I know that I have to daven. So says Rav Natronai Gaon, right? You never know. Once you start going, maybe a little kavanah comes, right? Then it comes. It's, if you wait for the intentionality, you could be waiting a really long time. Just do it. And the kavanah comes. And I'll tell you another story, personal thing. So when I was 22, right after college, I went to Jerusalem to study in yeshiva. And I studied this wonderful place called Pardes, Machon Pardes, like co-ed yeshiva, kind of liberal Orthodox. And I came from Orange County, California. I mean, my high school, there were 500 people in my graduating class. No, there were 2,000 people in the high school. There were maybe 7 Jews. It was not a Jewish atmosphere at all. And that was my kind of general atmosphere. I'm in Jerusalem. I'm in yeshiva. Let's just say I didn't know how to daven, right? And so I'm at this yeshiva, and I decided I was loving the classes. It was all great, but I didn't really know how to daven. So I said, I'm going to go to mincha every day. Mincha is super short, and I'm just going to start saying it. I'll look at the English, I'll wrestle with the Hebrew, and I'm just going to say it every day and see what happens. And that's what I did. I went every day. It was easy, right? I was a student. I didn't have to go to work every day, and I was in yeshiva. So I went every day, and I would mostly use the English and start working on the Hebrew, and I would try and piece together what it was I was saying and doing. And every day I kept doing it. And then it got better and better, and I started to learn it. And then I noticed that even though initially I was just kind of really just mailing it in, just saying words I didn't understand and not feeling anything. So then I started to feel things. I felt the power of other people praying around me. I felt the connection to the prayers that were composed 2,000 years ago. So I was connecting to my history. I felt very strongly this idea, Jews all over the city of Jerusalem and all over the world were saying the same words, right? And I was connecting to them. And then I started to specifically connect to some of the phrases and words I was saying. Not all the time. Sometimes it was pretty rote and I wasn't so into it, but it got better and better. So, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, right? By the way, this is a great Jewish answer. This was the rabbinic answer to Paul, right? To the apostle Paul, because Paul criticized Jewish law. He said, oh, those Jews, they just do things rote, and it's like a prison of law, and they have no genuine feeling, right? And so you can only do things with real faith if you're really feeling it. And the rabbis had many answers to that, of course. But one was, what are you talking about? Sometimes you just do something and the feeling comes after. right? It's not always preceded by the feeling. Sometimes the act generates the feeling, right? It's not always that you can't do the thing unless you feel it. Sometimes you do the thing and then the feeling comes, right? So that seems to be, right, what Rabbi David Kochavi is citing here, this tradition, okay? All right, let me stop. Are there any questions about these texts? Let me get out of the text. I just want to make sure we're okay. Stop share, that I'm not ignoring anybody who's been waving their hands for, to see, we good so far? Clear? Yeah, okay. I'll go back to the text, and we'll, of course, have time to, and there are more texts to come, some really juicy ones. Okay, and we're back. All right. So this is from the great Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who was, I call him the founder of modern Orthodoxy, 19th century Germany, right? He actually wrote this in German. This is a Hebrew translation, and then from Hebrew into English. Okay. So we'll look at his text in a minute. So I just want to note that, in my view, giving up entirely on the possibility of kavanah, saying, as some of our rabbis did, right, that we read, kavanah is like impossible. Back then, right, if we go back, what does it say? Right? In the early generations, their hearts were prepared for tefillah. In our day, nobody has kavanah, so you should just do it and hope that it comes. But there is a kind of negativity here saying they had kavanah back then, but we're not able to get to that level. I think I don't agree with this. I think giving up on the possibility of kavanah is a little too harsh for me. And that, yes, we don't want to violate the second commandment by praying without any intent, taking God's name in vain, but holding to an ideal of striving for a kind of pure intentionality seems to me to be to lose an opportunity for those who are serious about trying to pray. There's an effort here that is missing. So let's take a look at and see what Rabbi Shimshon or Samson Raphael Hirsch has to say about this dilemma we face. Here we go. The nation learns that when a person enters into the service of God with full knowledge and consciousness, they rise to a heightened level of which there is none in the world. So when you enter into Avodat Hashem, right? Shibishah Adam Nichnas, when you enter La Avodat Hashem, right, with full knowledge and consciousness, Bimlo Hayidiyah V'Hakara, right? They rise to a heightened level of which there's none in the world. And their standing before God is one of closeness without any intermediary. All the forces of nature are making noise. The noise of earthquakes, thunder, shaking mountains, like at Sinai, right? But Israel is inclining its ear to listen only to the speaking of God with Moshe. So this is an amazing vision, right? So Hirsch describes a noisy scene, distraction, right? The Sinai event, but people are somehow able to concentrate and hear God's voice despite the noise, the earthquakes, the thunder. In other words, he's using Sinai as an example of what we all have distractions, right? I mean, for me, my phone, huge distraction, right? We all have distractions. What's happening? Times of Israel, new update. Mamdani, New York Times, blah, 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 right? It's all buzzing around in my head. So for our ancestors, they're at Sinai, thunder, lightning, noisy, and yet, right, shofar, but they listened, the midrashic idea is they were able to focus, to cut through the noise, to listen to God, okay? And this text, we're going to move to another sheet. This is the last one here. This is from the great Rambam, from Maimonides, from Hilchot Tefillah, the laws of Tefillah. Here's what the Rambam says. What is meant by proper intention? Ketzad hi hakavana. Okay, and I want ketzad hi hakavana. Sheyifaned libo mikol hamachshavot. One should clear his mind from all his or her mind from all thoughts, and envision oneself as standing before the divine presence. Therefore, one must sit a short while a short while before praying in order to focus one's attention, and then pray in a pleasant and supplicatory fashion. One should not pray as one carrying a burden who throws it off and walks away. Oh, I fulfilled my obligation. Phew, glad that's done. Like I had this chiyuv, I had an obligation, a mitzvah, finished it. Now the burden's over and I can walk away, right? No. Therefore, one must sit a short while after praying and then withdraw. You're supposed to come, sit, focus, be quiet, and then pray. And then after davening, right, you don't run off because, oh, I'm so glad I've got it done with. The pious ones of the previous generations would wait an hour before praying and an hour after praying. They would also extend their prayers for an hour, right? And I think he might be talking about the tefillah, I mean, the Amidah. So that's really, really, really long, right? I remember when I was in 22 in Jerusalem, I used to go to a Breslov Hasidic shul, sometimes on Shabbos morning. These were real Breslov Hasidim. These weren't like the guys on top of the truck, you know, and wearing like with the super long payas. They were sort of like whatever, Satmar, Bobov, or Bells. They were Hasidim. And I just was curious, what do they daven like? And I'll tell you what they daven like. Slowly, right? They were really savoring every word on Shabbos morning in shul, right? Trying to really connect. So the point here, though, with Rambam, I think, is that the Rambam, right, knew that there were distractions and it was really hard to cut through it and to focus. You're saying the same thing over and over. Your mind is abuzz. So elsewhere, the Rambam says that one should just sit, sarich leyashev ma'at, sit at least just for a little bit, right? But here he's saying maybe for a longer period of time. So, all right, I want to stop there and I want to ask you about your own experiences of saying the Amidah. So far, we've been talking, you know, I find it consoling. It's really hard. It's a struggle to connect saying the same words. Again, not our words. I'm not pouring out my soul, right? So I just want to share that the rabbis knew that this was difficult. And so much so that they said, you know, some of them said, if you're not able to do it with real intent, maybe don't bother doing it at all. Or others said, just try, just give it a shot, and maybe the covenant will come. So I just wonder if anybody's willing to share, before moving on to some other texts, your own experiences of the Amidah, of saying these. It's called the Shmona Esrei, right? The 18 blessings, but it's actually 19 blessings. That's a long story because it was originally 18 and then one was added a long time ago. Any thoughts about, you know, we're silent, we're davening quietly, we're saying the same thing over and over again. Anybody want to share an experience they have with it?
Rabbi, it's Avram. There's one thing that we haven't mentioned is the time element. So, for example, when we're starting the Amidah, we know there's going to be a time the rabbi is going to say we're going to repetition. So starting the process, if you want to have completed your davening, you're maybe going at a faster pace than maybe you should. Then when you do say those words, for people that have not finished, you do say, you have permission to continue davening, but I would say most people would return back to the start of the repetition. So they will not have completed their davening.
Yeah.
Right. So you're pointing, Avram, thank you. You're pointing also to a really important issue, just the time thing, right? So I'm lucky because we live in Montreal and there's this, I mean, I must say, a very lovely sense of respect, of kavod for rabbis. So generally speaking, Cantor Stotland or Chazan Cheney, Tannenbaum will notice if I'm not done or if Rabbi Moses isn't done and wait for us to finish. It's kind of this idea of kavod harav, right? Being respectful to the rabbi. But of course, they're not waiting, and I'm not also waiting for everybody to finish. And so what happens if you're davening and they proceed on with the service, whether it's the repetition or something else. And I would say this brings up a larger question, which is just, it's one thing for the Rambam to say, take an hour before you daven and an hour after you daven. But I mean, come on, people have to get to work, right? Like, there are things to do. And don't get me started, by the way, there's a whole gender thing, of course. The idea here is, what about little children? Well, of course, the woman is perceived as taking care of the children, so the guy can go learn and daven, right? So obviously that's a whole discussion, but that is the traditional assumption. But seriously, we have this problem that we have a life to live, right? We have obligations and work, and that's important. And of course, our sages knew that was important. And parnassah, like they knew that you have to make a living. So people don't have all the time in the world. And what that means is, for a daily minyan, when there's an awareness that people have to get off to work, that it's going to be fast. The clip is going to go to a fast clip. So how do you maintain heartfelt connection if it's speedy, right? I mean, when I was in Los Angeles, I used to often go to this kind of liberal Orthodox shul, and this wonderful, wonderful rabbi, the Rabbi Kanevsky. It was just obvious to all of us, he was just kind of ignoring the Shliach Tzibor, meaning he was going at his own slower pace, and was not keeping up with the prayer leader because he didn't want to, because he wanted to daven with more kavanah, with more intent. But he wasn't mad about it. He just sort of understood, like, they have to get off to the law firm or the federation job or whatever it is, right? So Avram, I don't have an answer for you. I'm just saying it's a dilemma. It raises an interesting dilemma. Other thoughts about the Amidah before we move on? I have some other good text to look at, but I want to give people a chance.
Well, I think if you're davening in Hebrew, and if you don't understand all the words, that impedes kavanah.
Good, for sure. If you don't understand it, how are you going to connect it? That's excellent. It's chaya, right? Is that right?
Yeah, right.
So look, this is a tough one. I would say my only answer to you, chaya, is, I mean, the rabbis are very clear. In the Talmud, it says, I mean, it doesn't say daven in English because there was no English at the time of the Talmud, but it does say, if you don't know the Hebrew, use the what's it called?
The vernacular.
Thank you. The vernacular. Use vernacular, right? The ideal is Hebrew, but you're absolutely allowed to use the vernacular. And I think, what I did when I learned how to daven was learning the Hebrew and so on, is I would just I'd go back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things started to become more familiar. I mean, let's face it, Hebrew, it's this 3-letter root system, right? So for blessing, Baruch, Bracha, Barchu, right? Bet, Resh, Chaf, comes up over and over and over again. Kiddusha, Kadosh, right? Kaddish, right? And so on. Kuf, Daled, Shin. So Mikudash, right? You start saying, okay, that means holy. And then you just start to see it. And I'm going to guess that in the regular prayers of the Siddur, not the Psalms, those are harder, but in just let's say the Amidah, how many what? 400 roots, maybe 500, but not 10,000, right? You start to see them and recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just say, chaya, it's sort of a combination of trying to work on the Hebrew, but not being embarrassed or afraid to use the English, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're right. How can you ask for kavanah if you don't understand what you're saying? It's absolutely, yeah. Roger, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could talk about the repetition, and is my intention supposed to be different when I'm doing it alone and when I'm doing it as a collective? So can you talk about that?
Thank you so much for asking that.
Mm-hmm.
So you may want to, I'll just start with it. Like, why the heck is there a repetition? So you probably have noticed that, like, say on Shabbat morning, we do this thing called the Heichi Kedusha, where we're all together for the first part, and then we're silent after the Kedusha. So that's kind of a compromise. You're really only supposed to do that when you're really in a rush. Ideally, what happens is you do the whole thing silently, and then you repeat the whole thing. Not you, I mean the person who's the prayer leader repeats it. So why? So it's pretty straightforward. Books are fairly recent. That is to say, books, a codex, meaning something that's not a scroll, but it's like in a book, right? They only go back, let's say, roughly to medieval times. They're very, very expensive and rare. So most Jews go really pretty late, I think into the 18th, maybe even 19th centuries in most places, Morocco, Poland, whatever, did not own a Siddur, right? And the shul might not have had that many of them. In medieval times, there literally might have just been a few of them. So then how do you pray? What would happen is the prayer leader, maybe the rabbi, whoever, the cantor, would have the book, and those who didn't have it would listen, and it would be repeated so that and they would say amen each time so that their obligation is fulfilled. They would have their obligation fulfilled even though they didn't say it themselves. This, by the way, I think is why in most Sephardic and Mizrahi, like Eastern, Iraqi, Egyptian, whatever, it's different style than us. You know how we like kind of just daven, quietly, and then the leader will guide us like at the end of each of the prayers and sort of say something at the end. So if you go to an Iraqi synagogue, the leader will say everything out loud from beginning to end, right? The entire thing is said out loud so that, and I think this is so that people who aren't great with the Siddur or whatever can listen and can say amen and have their obligation fulfilled. So to be honest, these days, it's when I say it's a little questionable, why do we need this? Now books are readily available. But it's one of those things, there's an expression, minhag avotenu biadenu, the custom of our ancestors is in our hands. It was done for so long that it's just become one of those things, like a tradition that we just do, even though, strictly speaking, it's probably not necessary anymore. So you don't have to coven off for the repetition.
So it was done twice because the prayer leader would say it and then the congregants would be able to repeat it? Is that what you were saying?
They wouldn't repeat it. They would just say amen.
They would just say amen. So it wasn't said twice.
They would listen and say amen. So their intent is in listening, not necessarily saying it, right? Because they don't have a prayer book in front of them.
Right.
So yeah, they would just say amen, listen to what the chazan was doing, because they didn't have a book. So that's why it started that way. Yeah. Okay. Anything else quickly before we move on?
I'm going to say something terrible. I don't know how to pray, but what I feel uncomfortable with is this constant repetition, the glory of God, and your terrific. I don't know how to deal with this. The repetition of the tochen, of the content.
So I'm not sure what you're asking, Valerie.
How do you? Well, I'm looking at the book. You are the king. Praise are you. Creator of all, and so on and so forth. All those things that we are showering God with. I feel strange.
Right. Look, that's a large question, which maybe I can't really address it in the context of the class, but about belief. And I mean, one thing we could talk about is just simply the idea that in Jewish tradition, we say Baruch Atah, which is crazy. Why? First of all, we're blessing God. Okay, that's weird because God is supposed to bless us. Okay, but we're blessing God. Secondly, where is the vu, right? Where is the z? There's no, like, we're using the same atah that I would use if I were speaking to, my buddy. It's informal. We speak, there's no formal, there's no vu or usted or whatever. Like it's just atah. And that is also, and the rabbis wrestled with this, and some said, how can you do that? You can't do that. How can you address? But the overwhelming tradition is, no, you can and you should try to relate to God in personal terms, and that God wants us to reach out to God in this very personal way. But Valerie, you're raising a large question about what is God and how do I relate to God? So that's, my brief is to sort of wrestle with this specific prayer. And I'm happy to, that's another, maybe we could have a different class on theology.
Sorry,
no, don't apologize. It's a great question. It's maybe the question. I think I if I really take it on right now, don't get me started. We'll be here for all night.
Rabbi?
Yeah, please, Leona.
Yes. You talked about the kavanah. So I find that the Sibur, Shaliach Sibur in the morning, he just races up. He's like in a train. He's off and running. So most of the time I'm caught in the middle and never finish. And I find that
Frustrating.
my mind does wander because, oh, darn it, I missed again.
Right.
And I'm saying Kaddish for Eddie every morning. Are my Kaddishes being counted or not? Because I'm doing, I'm like in the sky sometimes.
Yeah, so I say yes, they are. I said cottage for my father, for 11 months. It was hard. I wasn't always focused, but I like to think the Ribono Shel Olam, the Master of the Universe, has compassion for us. We can't always focus because we're human beings, all right? So that's number one. Number two, look, I mean, that's a whole subject about the mumbling and so on. But I will say this. Let me give you all a little tip. This is my little tip, okay, for how to cope. When it's just coming at you very quickly and you're not feeling it and it's just one page after another.
Yeah, exactly.
Here is my tip. So there's a very, very great scholar of Jewish studies who was at the University of Chicago for decades, Michael Fishbane. He's the one who did the commentary on the Haftarah in our Eitz Chaim. If you look at the commentary, it's by him. I happen to know him because one of his sons is one of my best friends. So he's written like 30 books on Midrash and Torah and so on. He's modern Orthodox. And he davens like he's so soulful and amazing. Like I love to just stand near him when he's davening. But I once asked him, like, how are you doing? And he says, oh, hardest thing in the world. Requires constant work. It's a discipline, it's a practice. But one of the things he said that really stuck with me, because he's davening 3 times a day, every day. It's very, very hard to maintain a sense of passion. He said, each time he davens, he'll focus on that davening on a phrase, even a word, and that will become his meaningful, not exactly mantra, but like it's just his meaningful concept for that particular mincha on that day. And he says, if I come out of it feeling a little bit of connection, a little bit of transcendence around one word or phrase, dayenu, right? Good enough, right? And if Michael Fishbane, he should live long and in good health, can say that, I feel like that's like, so he's saying the words, Leona, he's doing it. And he's.
But if he's saying them, sorry, Rabbi, but if he's saying them,
yeah,
and he's focusing on one word,
right? So
how to echo Valerie, how do you do that?
Right, so it's sort of, you have to compartmentalize, meaning it's sort of like you're saying the words, you can get into the flow of it. You sort of let go a little bit of like, I have to understand everything and I have to connect to everything. You just let it go. You just sort of say the words, you're in the flow. It's just the davening, but then you want to have a hook, right? So you're doing 2 things in your mind simultaneously. You're kind of saying the words, but there's like a motif or theme for that davening. It could be Kedusha, Kadosh, right? It could be Ratzon, will, I don't know what. It could be acceptance. It could be whatever the word is that you pick. And so that's his like motif for that davening. So he's kind of saying, he's admitting, Elaine, he's admitting that he can't connect to all of it. He feels an obligation to say all the words. He's doing it without a ton of feeling, but he doesn't feel like he's just mailing it in because he's able to latch on to something that's meaningful each time. Could be a word or a phrase. So he's doing, it's a very good question. He's doing sort of 2 things at the same time. So I want us to finish by 8:45. I want to look at some more text. Archie, I'll call on you, but you got to be quick. I hope it's not, how do I?
Unmute Archie.
Yeah, okay. So
can't be, how do we believe it?
Archie, you're muted.
No, I hear him. Oh no, now I don't hear you.
Archie,
okay,
unmute.
how's this?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so is there an obligation to complete the Amidah? And I'm asking that question for a very special reason. I guess, first of all, is there an obligation to complete the Amidah?
Okay, so I'd say yes,
Okay.
but here's the thing. Let me just quick intervention here. Another tip. The core of the prayers, the most important things by far, the Amidah and the Shema. Okay, so my recommendation is let Asher do his thing or whoever else is leading, right? Focus on the Shema and the Amidah, right? And it's okay if you're behind. I get behind all the time, right? It's okay. Like, do your thing. He's just the guide. He's not the commander, right? He doesn't like, it's not like, oh, you have to be with him. He's just letting us know where he is, right? But you can, I have a friend who's a conservative rabbi in Minnesota, who's davens very slowly. And he, like, everybody's standing for the Amidah. He's sitting, right? Not because he's being disrespectful. He's not ready yet. Like, he might be still in the Shema. And everybody kind of understands that's his thing. He just likes to daven slowly, right? So that's another tip, is don't feel pressure to say every word of, like, there's lots of warm up, Psukei de Zimra, that's all warm up. Lots of it it developed over time, but the core, Shema and the Amidah.
Okay,
So
I seldom, I seldom arrive before the preliminary prayers.
Yeah.
Okay, so Amidah begins, and I can manage about a third or a half of it until there's a repetition, and then the repetition goes quickly. So by the time that's completed, I let's say there's still about 25% left, and the invitation is issued usually by you that if you're not finished, continue on, right? But gee, that feels awkward.
Right.
It feels very conspicuous.
Yes. Listen, I hear you. I don't have any easy answers, but the thing is, no, I would say this. It's okay. Keep going. I mean, you might have to wrestle with the conspicuous thing. Everybody's sitting. They might be schmoozing. You're still on the Amidah, standing there conspicuously, sticking out like a sore thumb. It's okay. Like, really, I mean, I know it's easy for me to say that, but the idea here is that, on the one hand, we can't wait for everybody because that will be there for a very long time. But on the other hand, people should be able to daven, and it's okay. Like, I mean, sometimes I would, when my kids were very young, and I was going to sleep like at 3 a.m. because they were up and blah blah blah. I would get to shul late, like during the Torah reading, and I still haven't davened. So everybody's sitting there, like, just listening to the Torah reading, and I'm standing myself, davening, and it's okay. Like, no, everybody understands. Like, or no, really, nobody cares.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I just want to say, Rabbi, that very short. When we sing, I connect to the prayers. When we don't sing, I connect less. So for me, the singing helps me connect. The music for me, the singing.
Yes. Good.
I'd like to pick up on that, if I may, what Roger just said. The whole purpose of services is to have some kind of communal activity. It could be communal prayer. It could be communal celebration. And I personally don't think it can work very well, or as well as it should, if there are stragglers. And there are a lot of stragglers, myself included.
What do you mean by straggler?
What?
What do you mean by straggler? What do you mean by
straggler? Means somebody who hasn't kept up with the pace. He hasn't finished. And even if you say, oh, it's okay, you can do your thing, you finish, you take your time, do it. Doesn't work if you have an entire congregation. And if you have lots of stragglers, you might lose the sense of communion, which I think is what Roger was referring to when he mentioned the singing
Yeah.
And I can certainly relate to that because I feel most part of the service when I sing with others. And sometimes I wish that from the point of view of the conduct of a service, we were more like Protestants. A lot of hymn singing, a lot of congregational participation. That serves the purpose of the human connectedness. It also, from my point of view, serves the purpose of Jewish continuity, for want of a better word. Which brings me to my next question, which picks up on Valerie's point, which essentially is the difficulty of belief. How can you believe this torrent of words which we face almost every Jewish service? How do you absorb it all? How does it become meaningful?
Maybe I have to interrupt you. I have to interrupt because you're taking
am I taking too much time?
Yes.
Yeah, your time. You're gonna have to interrupt you. So let me just say quickly, the framework. I mean, the problem of belief is very difficult, and it's a large and complex one. We'll get to, I would say, I mean, I'll cut through and say that the flood of words is tough, but actually the Amidah is pretty crisp. It's not that long, except if it's Musaf on Rosh Hashanah, but it's actually not super long, and it is possible to focus on a few. You don't have to. Yes, you could look at it as a flood, a torrent of words coming. But I look at it as a kind of not as a flood, but as a lovely sort of a breeze, a gentle breeze that's blowing over me, right? That I don't necessarily have to single things out. I'm surrounded by other people praying. I'm surrounded by the beautiful words in the Siddur. And my task, so I disagree with you about something, Bill. I not disagree. I think I would agree with half. You're halfway there for me. The purpose of being together is not just community. The purpose of being together is community and connecting to some sense of transcendence. Call it God, call it something bigger than I am. It is both communal and personal, right? And I just have to part ways with you. I don't really connect to the Protestant mode. The Reform movement historically very much did. Not just the Reform, conservative and Orthodoxy in Germany were informed by it as well. More propriety, more collective, kind of saying psalms together or whatever. I would say that the traditional forms of Jewish prayer it's like this. I'm standing before God, pouring my heart out individually with others, right? I'm supposed to be with others. It's better to be with a minyan. I'm in community, but I'm also standing before God on my own. Right. So I'm just saying, I guess where we may part is the struggle of the Amidah to me is I'm connecting with my past, as I said, with words that have been said by countless Jews for countless centuries and by Jews all over the world right now. That gives me a sense of being anchored in place and time. But on the other hand, they aren't my words, and it's not necessarily from my heart. So my challenge is can I make my own personal individual emotions and situation integrate and connect with the words, some of the words on the page. And again, I feel like it sounds like people feel overwhelmed by all of these words and keeping up with Asher and all of it. And it's real. I don't mean to denigrate it at all. I'm just saying that my recommendation, and I feel like some of the best advice I've gotten from very spiritually inclined rabbis and thinkers is to not, that's just a guidepost, right? But to try and just select something meaningful for you out of the breeze, out of or maybe breeze isn't the right metaphor. It's like a river, not a flood. it's a river, right? That's going gently, right? But to pick out a particular reed or a stone or something that's, part of that river that's yours, right? So I feel like there's a combination of collective and individual. And to try, and I hear you, this is, some of this is just about taste, right? You, Bill, might just really like it when we're all singing together on the same page. What to you is stragglers is to me, Archie is standing before God and he's like taking a sweet time. And I feel like it's a really great thing. Like, just keep on going. I don't feel like he needs to keep up with all the rest of us, that it's okay. On the other hand, I don't, it can't be total chaos. It's not just 100 people in a room individually. There is some order to it. It's a delicate balance, right? There are things we all sing together and things that we're doing individually. The Amidah is really meant to be each of us standing individually before God, but we're doing it with others, right? Sort of surrounded by fellow Jews standing before God. So it's a difficult struggle. So I just have a few more minutes because I don't want to keep you too long, but I just want to look at a few more texts. I really appreciate everybody's super thoughtful and interesting challenges and comments. So let me get to the text. 1 second. There we go. Okay. So now we go back to Zoom, blah, blah, blah. There we go. Share, boom, and boom. Okay, there it is. This is text sheet 2. All right. So I want a fundamental question, which nobody's asked, but I'm going to say it's this sort of, it's lurking. It's the elephant in the room, right? Which is, why are we obligated to say the same words over and over again? Like, where does that come from, right? That why can't we just say what's in our heart, right? Where in our tradition does it come from that we're supposed to say the same thing over and over again, which one might say inherently works against a heartfelt and soulful kavanah, right? I've mentioned the benefits of having a fixed liturgy, right? That sense of connection with the past and so on. But, where does this come from? So you'd be surprised. One of the main sources is from Parshat Pinchas in the Torah book of Numbers. And of all things, it's from what might be somewhat dry source, which is a description of the korbanot, the sacrifices. And here's what it says. Say to them, these are the offerings by fire that you are present to God, to Hashem, as a regular burnt offering every day. Takrivu Lashem, right? It says, Shnaim Leom Olat Tamid, a burnt offering every day, 2 yearling lambs without blemish. You shall offer 1 lamb in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at twilight. This is called the Tamid offering, okay? 1 lamb in the morning, 1 at twilight. This was part of the sacrificial ritual. It's in the Torah. It was said it was done every day, every single day. Yom Kippur, Shabbat, Pesach, regular Tuesday, doesn't matter. It was done every day, okay? And from this, right, we have a rabbinic enactment, a law in the Talmud that says as follows. The rabbi said they derived the Amidot, that is the plural of Amidah, the standing silent prayers, from the Tamid sacrifices. The morning Amidah from the morning Tamid sacrifice, right? And the Mishnah, the Mincha Amidah from the twilight Tamid sacrifice. The second lamb you shall offer. Okay, so the Tamid is offered constantly, right? This Tamid, this offering. It doesn't depend on personal feelings. It doesn't depend on our inspiration. It's reliable. It's predictable. It happens twice every day, right? Indeed, the Tamid sacrifices, the lambs were meant to be identical. The morning lamb is not supposed to be different from the evening lamb. So this is a model of prayer, which may feel somewhat alien to some of us, but nonetheless, it's an important model of prayer in which we're called to pray consistently without a variety in our offerings to God, which of course our offerings to God now take the form of words of prayer rather than lambs. So it expresses a kind of ongoing and everlasting connection with God that doesn't dissipate or waver. So one value of the Amidah is precisely this. I'll call it constancy, right? That is consistency, constancy, that we have an ongoing connection to God that actually is not linked to my individual soul and my emotions, right? I am part of something larger. I'm part of the Jewish people. I'm part of the world of Torah, right? And this is something which is considered, excuse me, important, indeed essential. So then, of course, the first question that may leap into your minds, it's 8:42. I'll go to 8:47 and then we're done, okay? Is okay, fine, right? So I'm going to skip that. Then what about my soul? I'm going through something difficult. I have a child, God forbid, who's sick, or my business just went out of business and I'm very, very anxious. I can't sustain my family, right? Or alternately, I just heard my daughter's going to get married and it's a great simcha and I'm feeling joy. Where is room for the individual in this vision? Okay. So the fact is that fixed liturgy was never the entire story of Jewish prayer. It's part of the story. It's part of the story, but it's not the only thing. So already in the Mishnah, in the ancient text of Jewish law, about 1800 years old, Rabbi Eliezer, different rabbi, not Elazar, but Eliezer says, Ha'oseh tfilato keva, if you make your prayer fixed, meaning rote, right? Ein tfilato tachnunim. This prayer is not supplication, and therefore it's, you could say, flawed. That's what he says, right? It's somewhat flawed. Continuing in the Yerushalmi, right, the Jerusalem Talmud, Rabbi Acha said in the name of Rabbi Yossi, one must innovate something new in the Amidah every day. Tzarich lichadesh ba devar b'chol yom. You need to make something new every single day, right? That is to say that this is how I'm interpreting this. That the fixed liturgy is meant to mirror the national kind of daily sacrifice, but the Amidah also has to contain moments of specific personal prayers. And indeed, the rabbis debated where in the Amidah you're supposed to inject your own situation, right? So for example, the prayer for healing, there's a section that says, take your time, inject your own thing, say in your own words, in English, your own thing, right? The prayer for sustenance, you're supposed to say, according to the rabbis, your own thing. It's not that you don't say the prayer for economic sustenance, right? For good crops and all of that, but you add to it your own personal thing, okay? So how does this play out? We have to innovate and we say something fixed, right? And this actually could mean that during the Amidah, you inject in it, in certain places, what's going on in your life, right? That you don't just say what's on the page. There's a kind of combination of the fixed and the intentional, right? So here we have a teaching from Rabbi Aaron ben Yaakov HaKohen, who lived in Spain and Provence, and he says, after the morning and afternoon Amidah, one falls on one's face and prays whatever supplications they desire. Now, what he's describing is what we now call tachanun, right? The daily tachanun, which predictably became its own fixed prayer, right? But originally, it was just meant to be a spontaneous supplication. And it is certainly permitted, and indeed, I would say, encouraged to do that. So I'll just conclude with a thought from one of my teachers, Rabbi Eli Confer, who's a rabbi in New York at Hadar. And here's what he says. Many people contrast the terms keva, meaning fixed liturgy, and kavanah, intention, as if fixed liturgy cannot be invested with true intention, as if they're opposites. Fixed liturgy on the one hand, true soulful intention on the other. I do not find this accurate or helpful, he writes. First, one can and must insert elements of personal kavanah between the spaces inside the fixed prayers, right? And second, he writes, one can and must have kavanah for the fixed words of the liturgy, even as one certainly has kavanah for one's own personal prayers. Kavanah ideally infuses both types of prayer. So what we'll be looking at next time is, therefore, when I have those individual blessings in the Amidah, how do I make them personal? That is, I don't have to tell you that if you have a strong feeling and emotion, you know how to express it. Just like, you can just say it and express it in whatever way it is meaningful for you. But if I have the words on the page about redemption or Jerusalem or whatever, how do I make those personally meaningful? How can I make the fixed come to life and intersect with my own emotional landscape? And that's really the struggle. That's what Bill pointed out, the flood of words coming, right? How can I single out some themes and ideas in the Amidah such that they resonate in my soul, right? I think that's the challenge. I'm trying to encourage people to slow down, not just follow Asher or Cantor Stotland, to find sections that are meaningful, to inject your own supplication, your own emotion in the Amidah. So Leona, for example, right? Forget about Asher. If there's a moment in the prayer, you're feeling sad or you're feeling, I don't know, whatever emotion you're feeling, you have license to say that. I'll conclude with one final story. When I was in rabbinical school, I had this teacher of tefillah named Rabbi Mimi Feigelson. And she was very Orthodox and she was very groovy. She had like huge rings on every finger and jingly jangly like necklaces and earrings. And she came from a Hasidic background. She dressed very modestly, but she had so much jewelry. And she was a real expert on Hasidic spirituality. And so she asked all of us, she said, I want to hear, this is in my class, right? Students, tell me your experience of prayer. Like, how do you relate to God? Just start sharing. Very therapeutic. It's California, after all. So all of us started saying, oh, well, when I say the Shema, I feel this thing, or I say the Amidah and the third blessing, I really struggle with, or whatever. And then she interrupted us. She's like, no. I didn't ask about your experience of the Amidah. I asked about how you talk to God. And we were all like, well, what are you talking about? The Amidah is how we talk to God. And she's like, no. The Amidah and the rest of the prayer book is the minimum. That's the floor, right? That's just meant to give you an opportunity to encounter God. But you're meant to be talking to God, right? Like in your own language, in your own way. This is a super Orthodox Hasidic woman, right? And I feel like everybody breathed a sigh of relief. She was giving us a kind of license to go back to my story of that student in the hospital, to put the book down and just feel and speak, right? Even the rabbis said that we can do it in the Amidah itself, injecting our own feelings and our own words, right? So Reb Mimi, as we called her, I think really had insight. And she cited, Hasidic traditions of going into the forest. It's called hitbodedut, going alone, going to the forest, or as they would say, hisboidedus, right? Going to the forest and just talking to the Holy One without the Siddur, right? So we're going to go on and talk more about this, having that balance between kavanah, between fixed liturgy and intentionality and heartfelt feeling. So I'll stop there. Thank you. It's 8:51. Oh gosh, I went 4 minutes over my own limit. Thanks so much. Great to see you.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you
Good
for your
night.
questions.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rabbi.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.